The drive let go with 2 cabins loaded and hanging out over the middle of the valley. One moment the tram was climbing the way it climbs 1,000 times a day, and the next there was a bang up in the machinery, and the whole line lurched, and the cabins rolled backward and swung out over 1,000 feet of open air, and the sound that came down that mountain, the screaming, I heard it from the base station before the emergency brake finally caught and held them there, swinging over nothing. The brake caught. Nobody fell. We got both cabins back to the station and every person out, shaking, some of them hurt from the jolt, but alive. And there was going to be an investigation, and everyone already knew the shape of the answer. The operator ran the tram. The operator mishandled the drive. Her hand was on the console, so it was her hand that nearly dropped a gondola full of people into a valley. 14 years I ran that cableway. 14 years, and nobody was ever hurt on a tram I was operating, because that is the whole job. The operator is the one thing between a loaded cabin and a very long fall, and I ran it that way every single cycle. The safety checks were a religion to me. Careful was the whole thing I sold. It was the only thing I ever sold. And in the time it takes a drive to let go, I was the operator who nearly dropped a gondola full of people. I want to tell you about the man who put me there. His name was Beck, and he was the mountain operations manager. Beck ran the mountain. On the biggest holiday of the season, with the whole resort full and the line for the tram wrapped around the plaza, the control system threw a fault, a drive and brake fault, the kind the procedure has exactly one answer for. You stop the tram, you lock it out, and you do not move another cabin until it's cleared. So I hit the e-stop. I held the cabins on the line, safe, and I called it in, and I did not run it. And Beck came down to my station, and what he saw was not a safety fault. What he saw was the flagship tram going down for hours on the highest revenue day of the year, and a mountain full of guests who couldn't get up or down. And he made a different call. He took his supervisor key, and he overrode the fault, and he force reset the control system, and he told me to keep it running. And I want to be honest with you, the way I have had to be honest with myself since. I did not send those cabins. The override was his, the reset was his, and the drive command that started the next cycle went out under his key, on his order, against a lockout I had already set. And on that cycle the thing the fault had been warning us about happened up in the machinery, and the drive let go, and 2 cabins full of people rolled back out over the valley. And the second the brake caught, Beck's story was already made. He did not tell them he'd overridden a drive and brake fault to keep the tram running for the money. He told the resort, and then he told the state tramway inspector that the operator mishandled the drive and caused the rollback. He pointed at the console. At me. Here is what that costs an operator like me. It is not just the job. That certification, the thing that lets me run a passenger cableway at all, a finding that I endangered loaded cabins over a valley ends it, and nobody puts an operator with that on her record back on a tram. 14 years, and running the cableway is the work I know. And with passengers hurt hanging over open air, the word negligence gets said by people with badges, and it does not stay a safety review for long. I drove down the mountain that night a 40-year-old woman who'd been told she might never run a tram again and might be charged for a cycle I had refused to run. My daughter asked me why I was so quiet. I told her something terrible almost happened at work, and someone said it was my fault, and that I was going to prove whose key sent those cabins back. I said it out loud, so I'd have to go do it. The young lift mechanic had been right there in the station. He'd watched me e-stop and heard me call the lockout and seen Beck override it with his key. But he was new and he was scared, because crossing the operations manager is how a young mechanic stops getting a season, and I wasn't going to hang a scared kid's job against a manager's as my whole defense. This wasn't going to get fixed by whose story the resort wanted to believe. It was going to get fixed by the one thing in that station that logs every fault and every override and doesn't care who the operations manager is. Because here is what Beck forgot, the way these people always forget the one thing. That tram runs on a safety controller, and it writes down everything. Every fault it throws, every e-stop, every reset, every manual override, and every drive command, all of it logged, stamped to the second, and tied to the key or the credential that did it. The controller does not care about the line at the plaza or the revenue, and it does not care that Beck is the manager. It just records what the tram did and whose key made it do it. So through the state tramway safety investigation, and with me pushing for the records, we pulled the control system event log, the maintenance history, the base station camera, and we put it all on one timeline, the 20 minutes around that fault, laid out to the second. The log showed the drive-in brake, fault enunciating. It showed my e-stop. It showed that I held the cabins and did not run, the tram sat locked out. And then it showed the fault being overridden and the system force reset under Beck's supervisor key, not mine, and the drive command that started the fatal cycle going out after his override, against the lockout I'd set. The maintenance log showed the fault was real and uncleared. And the base station camera showed Beck at my console with his key. The tram had recorded the whole thing. And it said the operator stopped it, and the manager overrode it and ran it. They held the tramway safety review in a conference room at the resort. The general manager was there. The state tramway inspector was there. Beck was there, in a resort jacket, still sure that a manager's word beats an operator's, the way it usually does. My rep put the control system event log up on a timeline, and we didn't argue. We walked the 20 minutes. The fault. My e-stop. The override, under Beck's key. The force reset. The drive command. The rollback. The state inspector asked Beck one question. He asked him whose supervisor key had overridden the drive and brake fault and reset the tram. Beck didn't have an answer because it was in the log under his own credential. The young mechanic, hearing the controller back him up, said out loud that Beck had ordered the override. And I watched it land on Beck in front of the general manager and the state inspector, the moment he understood that the tram had been recording the entire time, and the controller doesn't feel the pressure of a holiday crowd and doesn't care who runs the mountain. They cleared me completely. My certification was never really in danger once the event log was in front of the inspector. The record had me stopping the tram and refusing to run it. I went back to the console with the back pay and a finding on the record that the operator acted correctly and the rollback was caused by a manager overriding a safety fault. The resort locked down the thing that let it happen. Nobody can override a tramway fault on a single key anymore. It takes 2 authorized signatures, and it throws a logged lockout the whole mountain can see. The young mechanic kept his season and his job, and nobody ever put his name near it, I made sure. And Beck was fired, referred to the state for overriding a safety fault on a passenger tramway, and made to answer for the people he left swinging over that valley, the exact thing he'd tried to hang on me. I still run the tram. Same console, same cabins climbing out over the same valley, and I still hit the e-stop the instant the control tells me something's wrong, and I do not run a cycle for anybody, no matter how long the line or who's standing in my station with a key. And sometimes on a clear day, the cabins gliding up over the valley smooth and full, and everybody in them just there for the view. I think about how the whole time they were calling me the operator who nearly dropped a gondola. The thing that was going to save me was the tram itself, logging every fault and every override, keeping the record right there under my hand. I built 14 years on every cabin coming down safe. It turned out the tram had been keeping that record right alongside me the whole time.